r/ask Reddit. What is something about yourself that is completely true but that nobody would believe? When I was in high school, a random new kid started stalking me, like following me home from school. I'd see him outside my house. He'd stand by my locker at school. He was weird. Told my counselor but they didn't really believe me. Told a teacher I was close with and he talked to the principal. They said they'd watch out. After about a week my boyfriend was pissed the school wasn't helping me. He confronted this kid and they almost physically fought. Finally, he got kicked out of school and about a month later, less than 3 miles from my house, he strangled a girl my age, who also went to my school, and dumped her body in a field. This hit home for me because a guy in my friend group started stalking me after he asked me out and I said I wasn't interested. He threatened to kill us both in texts he sent to me and would follow me in the halls and wait for me by my classes. But no one did anything about it except my friend on the football team. My friend walked me to my classes and activities to make sure I was safe until the end of the year. This happened in May of our senior year. He was such a great friend. Don't know what happened to the stalker kid though, and I'm happy not to know. In 1982 I met and had a long conversation with Joe Perry, the guitarist for Aerosmith, in a bar. I told him what kind of guitar I was playing at the time. He said he had one somewhere up north at a girlfriend's house but never played it. I told him he should find it. A few months later his new album came out and he was holding the guitar. In 1996 I jammed on stage with Tommy Chong. About 10 years ago, I got drunk with the drummer and guitar player from Mudvayne. The night before the show, my buddy called me and told me they were staying at the hotel where his GF tended bar. I headed down there, and within 30 minutes had struck up a conversation with them. Went outside for a smoke a few times. Ended up having a couple PBRs on the bus. Matt, the drummer, got pretty crazy once he was drunk. There was a truck sitting close to the bus in the parking lot across the street from the hotel. He decided he wanted to break the window and hotwire it for a joyride. I told him, dude, I drive by here every day OTW to work. This truck has been here for 6 months. The battery is dead. Don't duck shit up just to duck it up. I don't have a lawyer on retainer. He was like, that's good advice, man. Let's just wander around. It was a good time. The show the next night was killer too. Gang members tried to rob me and I told them no. I was alone in downtown Minneapolis and 2 Bloods tried to rob me but I laughed and said I don't have money on me because so many people see a skinny white guy and try to rob me. I was lying and I don't know why I reacted that way. One of them stared at me for like 5 seconds then said okay, you're cool, and they walked away. Minneapolis doesn't have nearly as much of a gang problem now, but definitely did then. This happened when there was a parking lot across 7th St. from First Ave, the club where Purple Rain was partly filmed. More detail if you want it. The first one asked for money and I said I didn't have cash. The second appeared out of nowhere. Like suddenly his face was right next to mine and he said I don't think you heard him. He said he wants your money. People robbing you? Just say no. Robbers can't legally rob you without your consent. My aunt was a school librarian. Years ago she attended a conference in Los Angeles for school librarians. Several of them walked away from where the conference was being held so they could get lunch. Some guy tried to rob them at knife point but the librarian and the lead just laughed and said, "We're school librarians. We don't have any money," and kept walking. The librarians behind her didn't even know what had just happened and looked at the guy curiously as they walked by. I can't tell faces apart and I can't picture people I know in my mind, not even close family members. If I try really hard the most I get is a very blurry image. If someone changes their hairstyle, or if I see them out of the context that I usually see them in, then I can't recognize them. Prosopagnosia. I married really young and my ex-husband ended up killing several people during our marriage. I had to separate from my daughter for our protection because he was still at large. After 9 years, I finally reconnected with her. People think I abandoned her, but as long as she knows differently, that's all that matters. We're safe and out of his reach now, and I couldn't be happier. I hope your name doesn't check out. I am so sorry this happened to you. I'm glad you both are now safe and together. Both of my parents have a twin sister named Jenny. Are they by any chance triplets from Alabama? Wait, I have never met the other Jenny. What if one of the Jennies doesn't exist and they are just cis? Screams internally. I jumped out from a moving bus to escape kidnapping. I helped a kid avoid being kidnapped by hiding him in a doghouse. His dad was a bigwig. This wasn't the first time this happened to the kid. Scary. I asked a dazed and scared looking young woman at a fast food restaurant if she needed help and she said yes. She wanted to know where she was. She'd just been dumped in the parking lot by some guy who'd kept her against her will for the past day. Luckily my teenage daughters were with me. They helped make her feel safe going with us to the police station. Offered hospital too, but she refused. I did not doubt her, but any question of her story was erased when we got to the station, which was closed. I called 911 and before I could even explain the situation to dispatch, several police cars pulled up, surrounding my car. Turns out she had been reported missing and in danger, so the cops had been trying to triangulate where her phone was. The phone was dead. So while we were driving to the station, I let the young woman borrow my car charger. She kept trying to turn it on, but the charger was so slow her phone kept shutting off again. The cops were following the pings each time the phone turned on. Same thing happened to me in college. Girl down the hall had some people serious about kidnapping her. She was from another country that had frequent kidnappings. Her father was a government muckety muck in that country, and they had just kidnapped her uncle. We kept moving and hiding her for a few weeks until the plot was foiled. I switched my handedness from right to left and I am now left-handed. My dad did that. Granted it was involuntary. He broke his right arm as a kid and his teacher gave him no exemptions or assistance. So he had to learn to write with his left. Now he's left-handed with a hint of ambidextrousness. I technically kidnapped my would-be mugger, bought him breakfast, helped him through rehab, getting a job, and eventually was the best man at his wedding. He's been clean on the straight and narrow now for 10+ years. And now you flip it up and get him arrested and laugh as he loses his new life you helped build. Well, I did technically kidnap him at the time, so I would also be looking at charges. I never forget names or faces, like ever. I realized this nearly 2 decades ago working at a telemarketing company. I never forgot a name and to this day can't think of several names I encountered that stood out. Later I worked at a nightclub and one day this couple came in. We'll call them Steve and Mindy. We chatted for about a minute or two. 3 years later Mindy runs into the bar hollering that someone assaulted her boyfriend. I said, oh no, is Steve okay? She looked at me like she's seen a ghost and I did think, oh, she's probably surprised I remember them. Later she asked how I could remember them and I just said that I never forget anyone I meet and have any substantial interaction with. I just don't forget names or faces ever. Almost 100% of the time they are permanently etched into my memory. Don't remember birthday or what day of the week it is, and after 6 years still don't have my plates memorized, but duck it. If we met one time for 5 minutes 20 years ago, I still remember you. Weird but true. That's a useful skill. I can remember names and I can remember faces, but I can't match the name to face half the time. I'm so bad at remembering names and applying them to faces that it makes it hard to follow TV shows. I'm on the 5th season of Castle and I just realized that one of the main characters is named Javier. My brain just ignores names like they are irrelevant. After multiple times going, I've never lost in Las Vegas. This is barely related, but you reminded me. The Science Museum by me has a machine that's supposed to demonstrate probability. It's basically a plinko board. A ball drops and bounces off pegs, and you're supposed to guess what slot it'll land in. I guessed right and refused to ever try it again because I'm perfect at guessing it. I did this for several years. I'd never gamble much, but I'd always make a few bucks at each casino, covering tips and letting me drink for free. It wasn't until I went to crap casinos in Oklahoma that I lost money. I can barely remember details past a few months ago. I have essentially no recollection of what things look like. Big events and things like that work fine, but details are gone, and half the time I can't tell if I actually remember something or I remember someone telling me about something. Emotionally traumatic childhood could be a defense mechanism to forget experiences that were too painful for you to process. I guess you wouldn't remember that far back. Man shrugging. I was the guy who microwaved an entire carton of eggs in the microwave in the break room last month. Jeff, is that you? Damn it, Jeff still smells like egg in here. When I was younger I was river tubing with some family. Stupid me forgot to bring eye drops for my contacts, and one popped out into the water. Later we come to a shallow end, and this little girl finds my contact. Like, what are the odds? In case you're wondering. Yes, I popped it back in. Looking back I don't know what the bigger miracle is. Losing a contact in a river and finding it again, or not getting my eye infected when I put it back in. My husband lost his wedding ring in the ocean. It was a very rough day and the waves were relentless. He lost it when he tossed something to his son and the ring went flying off his finger. He spent the next 5 minutes in a full panic trying to find it. Right when he gave up, he spotted it on the ground about 2 feet away from him. I can stop hiccuping by force of will. Is it possible to learn this power? It's all in the breathing. I concentrate hard on very controlled breathing, just like meditation, without letting the hiccups interrupt. If I can do that for about 30 seconds then I can start to zone in on the muscles that are spasming and stop them. Damn. I'll try it next time I get hiccups, but I doubt I'm skilled enough at life. My nightmares, after my father was murdered, were cured by a shaman in the Amazon jungle. Full story please. I started having regular frightening nightmares after my father was murdered in 2005. They usually took the form of another member of my family being murdered in front of me, and were so scary that I'd wake myself up, making those awful gurgling noises you make when you're trying to scream. This went on for months. My husband and I went on vacation to Venezuela later that year to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. We were staying at a place called Canema, and from there, made a trip into the jungle. The guide asked if we'd like to meet the local shaman. He was just a little guy in his 40s wearing a pair of football shorts who answered our questions through a translator. We were about to leave when the guide said, "Any more questions?" I said, "Can you get rid of nightmares?" And he said yes. He got me to sit on a tree stump and made up a fermented drink which I couldn't take as I don't drink alcohol. He lit some tobacco leaves. They smelled lovely, nothing like cigarettes, and paced around me, chanting and covering me with smoke. I didn't feel any different during or after, and I didn't believe it was going to work, but I never had another of those nightmares. I have been dreaming of a girl since I was a small child. She would appear in any dream I was having at the time and talk to me, play games. This happened almost daily for years until I was 12. I thought maybe she had been my wife in another life. One day I told her that we couldn't see each other anymore and that I needed to move on with my life. She cried and I felt horrible as I said goodbye. I stopped dreaming of her after that and regretted it badly for the next 23 years. 3 years ago a woman that looks just like her walked up to me and said we should be friends. I don't think I have ever had anyone just tell me to be their friend out of the blue like this. She is now currently my best friend and I look forward to every conversation we have. I have never met anyone that has mentally changed my outlook on life as much as her, and I am so grateful to have met her. People usually don't believe when I say I can tie my shoelaces while riding a bicycle. And yes, I need 2 hands for that. Not that special if you're Dutch. We can basically do everything on the bike. I am Dutch, yes. I can tell what people are eating through the phone. I don't know why, but this one is my favorite. I can remember some pretty random facts that people will tell me about themselves or things that would have happened to them while I was there. I don't mention that to people because without context it sounds creepy AF. My family ended up on the West Coast because Al Capone was rubbed the wrong way by my granduncle. He was murdered while visiting my great-grandpa's farm. I'm allergic to paprika. I live in Maryland. Maryland has this spice called Old Bay. This has paprika in it. The amount of people who honest to God do not believe I can be allergic to Old Bay is ridiculous. So much so one of my ex-friends who knew about my allergy invited me to her birthday party where all they had was Old Bay crabs. I had an allergic reaction and literally couldn't even be inside the house without it happening, so I just left. But her and a lot of people think I lie about my allergy for quirky points or something. But not even family believe me despite me having reactions in front of them. I also live in Maryland, and I'm allergic to crabs. We're like peas in a pod. I can smell death. Not like sudden death, accidents or whatnot, but if they are sick, I can smell it. first happened when I was like 2 or 3. Grandmother had cancer in pretty much all her organs. I couldn't stand to be too close to her cause she smelled so strongly. My mother is a nurse, so when I was older I would go meet her in the hospital, and it upset her how often when walking through the ward I could say who was going to pass soonest. She would say no, they are erecting well to treatment. They've got a good prognosis or they aren't fatal, so you should think that. You'll scare somebody, and yet I'm always right. Also pets. There was the cat my family had when I was young and I knew it was dying for weeks. Then one day the cat took a turn for the worst and my mum threw me in the car to rush to the vets. Put the cat in my lap. The whole ride I was watching and smelling this cat get closer and closer to death. Vet was amazed based on how ill the cat was that he had been acting and eating fine the day before. There's a named condition for this. Do you know what it is? I remember reading about it. I remember specifically there was a lady and some pet dogs that could smell the onset of Alzheimer's disease, which of course is fatal. If I send you a pair of my underwear, can you tell me how many years I've got to live? I kept my father out of prison as an infant. How? Long story short, my dad threatened to kick my sister's teacher's teeth in because he implied she looked like a slut. The teacher called the police for obvious reasons, but because there was no one available to take care of my infant self at the time if my dad were arrested, the police officer let him off with a warning. I mean, your dad wasn't wrong. If I had a daughter and a teacher said she looked like a slut, I would beat the ass out of the teacher. My eyes over time have started changing color. They were bright blue and now are transitioning to a hazel. I'm 26 and this started when I was about 15. Apparently this is a rare talent, but I can raise one ear at a time. Cilantro tastes like soap. During the main life of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3 I was ranked 12 on the free-for-all leaderboards. I regularly played against number 27 and could usually beat them with a pistol. My parents never paid for anything gaming related and I couldn't afford a molded controller, but I loved the hard hitting semi, so I practiced. My fire rate with the 5.7 was about 16 shots per second. I can't learn mathematic formulas after basic fractions. I can learn them briefly and will forget them within hours. High school was a nightmare. I can learn things and become expert at them, and then days later I cannot remember one thing about them and seem like a fraud when asked about the things I knew about just days before. I realize that I have replied to a few comments on this thread about having slight versions of a few things. I think my brain is broken in some way. I was in Ohio while working for Bellator MMA years ago and met Dave Chappelle outside a Starbucks. He invited me to dinner that night and we sat and talked for hours with just a few close friends. He was every bit as amazing to hang with as you'd imagine. It was a wild experience that I knew no one would ever believe. I don't know if anybody would believe it or find it true, but when I was born my esophagus was not attached to my stomach, so the doctors had to realign that and reattach it. So they gave me medicine for getting an allergic reaction to it. I believe it was called penicillin or amoxicillin. But they also realize at the same time my stomach has a hole in it, so they end up doing another surgery right after the first one. I have a huge scar on my stomach to prove by I don't think anybody would take me seriously. Sorry for the spelling, using text to speech is kind of difficult. I can read things instantly just by looking at them, like if it enters my vision, even for just a millisecond. I can remember what the entire thing said. This also works for things I'm not even directly looking at. Things in my peripheral vision get read too, even when I'm not paying attention. For example, someone can put a paper on my desk with a soup recipe. Let's say I never look at this paper all day, but I walk by it once while doing something else and it was in the edge of my vision. I'll suddenly start thinking about a soup ingredient from that paper, like 2 teaspoons of salt or whatever minor detail was written on it. Later when I look at the paper I will be like, that explains why I was thinking about this random ingredient all day. My eye must have caught it even though I never intentionally read the recipe. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.